course, this administration is looking for excuses. Why that their attempt to negotiate an outcome has been a total failure for over 8 months now, or for almost 8 months, because their approach was doomed from the beginning, because they didn't care about or didn't understand the origin of the war. They don't know the history, the culture, the geography, and they are thinking in terms of a New York City real estate deal instead of a global strategic security issue. And so now they're looking to blame somebody. And so the latest victim of their scapegoating is they're accusing Europe of pushing Ukraine to keep fighting. And that's the reason that the administration's approach is failing. The one person that they never, ever blame is Vladimir Putin. And so I hope that Europe will continue to invest in its own security by helping Ukraine.
Also, a senior White House official told Axios that Trump is seriously considering stepping back from diplomatic efforts to end the war in Ukraine until one or both sides begin to show more flexibility. Quote, "We are going to sit back and watch. Let them fight out for a while and see what happens." What is your reaction to such so-called strategy?
Yeah, well, of course, that's a strategy of avoiding blame for failure. They've never told Putin, get your soldiers out of Russia. They've never held Putin accountable for anything. They've threatened to do stuff. I think today was end of another 2 weeks when they were going to do things. Obviously, nothing's going to happen. So I think the administration is trying to create some distance between themselves and their failure to help find a solution to the conflict. I mean, today they should say, okay, everything else we've tried has failed. Let's try putting pressure on Russia. Let's tell Russia that unless you back out of occupied territory, we're going to do this, and this to help Ukraine. They've never done that. And so I'm sure that they would like, and by the way, this administration, all they have done since they took office back in January was to blame either the Biden administration or Europeans or Ukrainians or some other reason. They never say, we made a mistake. Zero accountability, zero acceptance of responsibility. So what you're describing is just the latest aspect of that.
Do you think that the current Trump's administration just doesn't care about Ukraine?
I don't think they care so much about Ukraine. I do believe that the president is serious. That they want the fighting to stop, the killing to stop. It's their approach to doing it is what's wrong. I don't think that the idea of Ukrainian sovereignty and this idea of Ukraine as a state is all that. I don't get the feeling that it's so important to them because they talk about Ukraine's going to have to give up some territory and and that Russia has valid claims. And so I think they, and when you talk about trading territory, giving up territory, this is not dirt. This is where people live. And millions of Ukrainian citizens would be affected by this. And I don't think they care about that. They think of it in terms of real estate, transactions in Manhattan, or minerals, access to minerals and weapons sales. That's what they care about.
Let's cover also this failed summit in Alaska. Don't you think that Mr. Witkoff has just misunderstood Vladimir Putin, and that was the reason of this big summit and big diplomatic failures there?
Well, Mr. Witkoff, of course, is a close personal friend of President Trump, but that does not qualify him to be an envoy, especially on such a difficult, complicated situation. Witkoff never had with him, he didn't do anything that you would expect, where you had your own State Department translators, briefings, all the things, and then you're going against the Russians, who of course are masters of negotiation and disinformation and twisting things around, and so it was um, uh, he was the wrong person, absolutely the wrong person. So whether it was misunderstanding, which is certainly possible because of this failure to have legitimate government translators, but also just the idea you can sort of, well, we're the U.S. and we got a good deal, and that somehow this would be effective. Just absolute total amateur hour, and so that's a lot of the reason why we are where we are. And the Russians, of course, see all this. They have no respect for this administration, and they are pretty sure that Trump is not ever actually going to make them suffer any consequences for what they do. And so, unless Europe can increase the pressure enough, the Russians are not going to feel the need to really change what they're doing or to stop doing what they're doing. The one thing that could happen, and I've been hoping it would, but so far I have been disappointed, is that my president, would finally get tired of being mocked by the Russians, of being disrespected by the Russians, and he would get angry and use this enormous amount of leverage he has over Russia. But so far, he has not been willing to do that, and I just don't see him changing. I hope I'm wrong on that, of course.
Also, there is a big discussions on security guarantees for Ukraine. According to Financial Times, the US is ready to provide intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, command and control, and even back a no-fly zone in Ukraine in case of a ceasefire deal is reached. What is your take on this big debate, discussion on security guarantees and some kind of positive statements from President Trump about the US readiness to contribute to this effort?
Well, I have no confidence that the Trump administration would actually do something substantial for a security guarantee. I wish they would. I wish we would be in the middle of it, that we would be providing air power, logistics, intelligence, everything that was needed, along with European allies, to help provide a deterrent. And this is what's been missing, Daniel, from this whole the conversation about security guarantees. What the hell is a security guarantee? The only guarantee of security is NATO membership, where an aggressor knows that if they attack Ukraine, then it's going to be as if they had attacked Germany, Poland, Finland, the United States, UK, Canada, on and on and on. And so that's as close as you can get to a guarantee against armed attack. And it's worked for almost 80 years. Now, short of that, what can we do to help Ukraine defend itself and to deter? That's what we're talking about now. Security guarantee means that Russia would stop attacking Ukraine. What would be required to do that? And I think it's a combination of things. Obviously, there's a lot that can be done economically before you put any troops on the ground anywhere. Using Russian frozen assets, stopping the export of Russian oil and gas, investing huge amounts of money into Ukraine's defense industry, so that Ukraine becomes like Israel, that it can create everything it needs, almost everything it needs by itself. That would be one part. The second part, of course, would be something that helps protect cities from drone and missile strikes. And I think that we ought to be doing for Ukraine what we do for Israel, where we had U.S., British, French, Jordanian pilots flying in Israel to stop Iranian missiles from hitting Israeli cities. And we've done the same thing against the Houthis in the Red Sea. So why can't we do this to help Ukraine? Of course, if you put a pilot up in the sky, you have to, number one, be prepared to attack enemy air defense. We would never put a pilot up if we hadn't already didn't have the capability in place to destroy Russian air defense. So that means, any talk about air support, other than logistics and transport, where you have to be talking about suppression of enemy air defense, to include shooting Russian air defense inside of Russian-controlled parts of Ukraine or even inside Russia. And you also have to assume that a pilot eventually will be shot down. And so you have to be, are you prepared to go in and pick him or her up if they land inside Russian-controlled territory or inside Russia? These are things that have to be sorted out. It's not just a magic shield that you would put over Ukraine. And then finally, if you're going to put troops on the ground in Ukraine, and I am for it, there's three or four things that would have to be answered. Number one, what is their mission? What do you want them? Do they just hang out in outside of Kiev or in Lviv or Kharkiv or Kherson? What are they doing? What's their job? So make it clear what their mission is. Number two, what are the rules of engagement? If we're going to put soldiers there, they have to be authorized to shoot back immediately without having to go back to Brussels or London or Berlin to ask permission. And so the rules of engagement part of this is very important. That's very hard to work out. That's very difficult to work that out, but that has to be a part of any deployment of troops. And then, of course, how are they integrated into Ukrainian defense? I mean, are they in separate little islands, or are they deployed as a second sort of line of defense behind, or are they, the airspace, air defense would have to be integrated with Ukrainian air defense. These are the kind of things that need to be sorted out. People are already talking about, well, it'll take 25,000 or 50,000. How do you know the number if you haven't even identified what they're going to do yet? So I'm all for it. I just think that we haven't done, at least publicly, that I'm aware of. All that hard work has not been done. I am sure that in the French and British ministries of defense, and probably in the German, and maybe even in the Pentagon, they've done a lot of the hard staff work to figure these things out. But publicly, I don't get the feeling that the diplomatic work has been done yet.
Also, according to Politicus, there are even discussions about the possibility of deploying as a third country neutral forces to Ukraine. Financial Times suggested that Trump was considering even the possibility of deploying Chinese troops to Ukraine. What is your reaction to this, another debate on the possibility of deploying so-called third country forces to Ukraine?
Yeah, the only thing dumber than deploying Chinese forces to be peacekeepers would be putting more Russians in to be peacekeepers. I mean, that's what a ridiculous act. Why would you give the Chinese the opportunity to get their boots on the ground and get in there? And they're the ones that are supplying Russia. They're buying Russian gas and supplying Russia with the capability to kill Ukrainians. So whoever thought that was a good idea has no clue about what actually is going on or how these things work. So this is an administration, or you got at least people in the administration. They are not willing to do the hard part, which is to put pressure on Russia. And so now they're just throwing bullshit ideas up on the wall to see what might stick. And unfortunately, even in Europe, which has shown a lot more resolve than probably Putin or Trump expected, they still have not been able for one European country to say, okay, fine, we will do it. Screw everybody else. If you're not going to help, get out of the way. We France, or we Germany, or we UK, or we Finland or Poland, we will do this. We will provide troops or capability somewhere to help, even if it means that we will be exposed to criticism or even attacked by Russia. So until Europe is able to act like that, I don't want to hear about European strategic autonomy. If they're not able to do this, if they're still waiting on the U.S., they're going to be very disappointed.
However, European allies are not ready to deploy troops without the U.S. backstop. But from your perspective, why is the U.S. so afraid of deploying boots on the ground in Ukraine? It could be the biggest security guarantees, ironclad one.
Well, it's not. There is no such thing as ironclad security guarantee unless you're in NATO. And even now, President Trump is like, well, I'm not so sure we would defend Montenegro, for example, or somebody that doesn't meet their 2% or 3.5%. Or so. I think I challenge anybody that talks about security guarantees or ironclad anything or this really ridiculous thing that Mr. Witkoff said, NATO-like. Like there is no NATO-like security guarantee. You're either in NATO or you're not. And so people are careless with terminology and ideas about how to do it. For the United States, I think the Trump administration, by the way, the Biden administration made the same mistake. They failed to clearly identify the strategic outcome. They just never could articulate what is the end state because I think they were fearful of a Russian nuclear weapon or something. I don't know. And now the Trump administration is just as bad in that regard. You you should never deploy troops somewhere if you haven't clearly identified the mission. What do you want them to do? But what happens so many times, it happened to us in Afghanistan, Iraq, Vietnam, where you send troops in and then try to figure out, okay, what's the mission and what are the policies? That's backwards. You've got to identify what you want them to do first. And then, the military will say, okay, if you want us to do that, this is what we need. And numbers, capabilities, rules of engagement, etc. The bottom line is, I think this administration does not want to offend Putin. They are completely held hostage by Vladimir Putin. I don't know why. I don't understand what it is, what kind of a hold the Kremlin has on this administration.
Also, let's cover another interesting topic
Yes.
regarding the Department of Defense. Our one of final one, the Trump's administration would like to rename Department of Defense as a Department of War. Do you support this idea?
It's another stupid idea coming out of this administration. I mean, this is the president who campaigned on no more wars. I'm the peace president. I'm going to stop wars. We used to have the War Department up through World War II, and then after in the 50s, it was redesignated the Department of Defense for a reason, and now, so this is a theater by the president, by the administration, to somehow convey, we're super strong, but we say that the video does not match the audio. And so it's a waste of time and energy, and the administration cannot just declare it anyway. This would require an act of Congress, and I doubt that I'd be disappointed if the Congress went along with it because it serves no purpose. And certainly, what the administration is doing is the opposite of that when it comes to Ukraine.
Also, in the meantime, Secretary Hexet was firing all people who were not really supportive of his idea, and he has fired Lieutenant General Jeffrey Cruz, the director of Defense Intelligence Agency, for submitting this report with according to this assessment of U.S. strikes on Iran. What is your opinion about such approach to the work in Pentagon?
Well, that's part of the reason why there's chaos in the Pentagon right now. They don't want to hear bad news. They don't want people to be honest and give them information that maybe doesn't fit their narrative. And so, if you don't want bad news, you get rid of people that, or you scare people who would normally be willing to tell you, the facts. And so we are going to regret this. It's created a terrible environment. The morale in the Pentagon right now is very bad. And you've got thousands of really good, hardworking, dedicated soldiers, officers, sailors, civilians, career security experts. So many of them have been fired. And this is damaging. It damages us. And it's poor leadership. if you're not willing to take criticism or to hear bad news or somebody to push back on what you're thinking, that to me reveals a person with a lot of insecurity. And Mr. Hegseth obviously should not be in that position. The only reason he is the Secretary of Defense is because he is he'll never say no to the president, and it's going to take us a while to recover from all this damage.